Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to walk through the basic steps of performing a k-means cluster analysis using SAS Visual Analytics in SAS Viya. So I open the SAS Visual Analytics, explore and visualize. I'm going to open a new report. Add data file. This data file is a donors for a non-profit organization. The purpose of segmenting these donors is to drive a relationship building strategy through personalized communication. Selecting variables for cluster analysis is a critical step because clustering is highly sensitive to variable used. So because I'm using a numeric or the interval label data, we need to make sure that they are not highly skewed and may require data transformation before clustering. For the purpose of this exercise, I'm choosing 4 variables that indicate past donation behavior, aligning with the core recency, frequency, and monetary marketing analysis framework. So amount measures monetary value, gift count measures frequency, and then we have this time since first gift measures tenure, and time since last gift measures recency. These all 4 variables are interval, and we need to initialize this variable, and I have done it here on the bottom here. I added these variables, I initialize them. So and the initialized variables I will be using for the purpose of my clustering. So now what we need to do here is first we need to go on the objects, and within the object we need to find out the clustering object. So we're going to drag the clustering object onto the canvas, and now we're going to assign those 4 numeric variables we have chosen for analysis into the variable role here. So I'm going to add those 4 initialize variables, the z scores of those variables here, and I'm going to close this. And by default, SAS Visual Analytics use the k-means algorithms and automatically create 5 clusters. So that's what we see here. This is the cluster matrix plot. It's showing cluster center by variable used, for example, in the analysis. In cluster analysis, it's always nice to have cluster centers as distinct as possible, but there are some clusters seems to be slightly overlap with each other. Now, here, this is our parallel coordinator plot, and it is a great for profiling cluster we have created. So each color here, the colors we have, for example, orange, so I'm going to isolate the orange. So the color here represent the cluster 4. And, um, and we can learn quite a bit about cluster 4. For example, we can see that they're pretty low on gift count and target gift amount, and the time since first gift. However, they're pretty relatively high on the time since last gift. So that's we can learn about them. So similarly, if I go on cluster ID number 1, we can see this cluster, they are low on gift count, but pretty, and also time since first gift, but they're very relatively high on the gift amount and time since last gift. So it's pretty high. So it's a nice way to understand how these clusters are doing in each variables. And you noticed that for each of the variable, there are numbers. For example, on the gift count, the number is like 8.44, and on the top and the bottom is negative 1.116. So these are the maximum value for that particular variable, and the negative 1.11 is the minimum value. So for each variable, you see a maximum minimum value, and of course these are the z scores, and because these are z scores, so average would be 0. So this kind of give you idea that how the value of each clusters lies within that particular variable. In the cluster matrix plot, from the cluster matrix plot, there is a cluster ID variable. If you click this one, of course, we can rename it. There's three different options we have. We can have a distance from the centroid for each cluster, and the standardized distance from the centroid. There's a cluster ID. We can rename them, but I'm just going to leave them as it is, cluster ID. So this variable will be added to the data source and can be used to profile the cluster further. So I'm just going to say OK. And so now, if you go to my data now, you notice that it's added here. These variables have been derived. Cluster ID. So cluster ID has been added here, and this variable gives every single observation in our data a cluster number. And this could be great to do further profiling. So let's try. So what I'm going to do is just going to add a new page so we can. So I'm going to drag cluster ID. It generated this bar chart for us, and this cluster IDs are sorted on a descending order, and we can see that cluster 4 is the biggest cluster and the cluster 3 is the smallest cluster. So if you want to analyze this cluster by other variables we have, we can do that, for example. So if we analyze them by a grouping variable, for example, if you want to look at the let's say their status category, for example. You just want to analyze them by a home ownership, for example. So this give you some idea what the home ownership look like for each of these clusters. So if you want to analyze these clusters, let's say by gift amount, so I'm just going to select that variable, gift amount. And then I have this plot next to my frequency. So it tells us that cluster one, on an average, giving more gift, whereas the cluster three is the lowest average value of the gift. And let's say if I want to analyze my cluster by grouping variable, and let's say gender, for example. So this give me a cluster by my gender. So there is no specific significant difference across the gender distribution of this cluster, but if we look at cluster 3, you notice that cluster 3 has relatively more females compared to the male, slightly. And that's it. That's a basic run through on how to create cluster analysis and profile your segment using SAS Visual Analytics. Thanks for watching.